And oh my, am I so excited for the guest that we have today. First, I want to give a shout out to my good friend who's an absolute genius at this whole live streaming thing, Sia. And she did say, just for everybody who's tuning in, if you are tuning in on your mobile device, we won't be able to see your comments in real time. And I actually experienced this on a previous LinkedIn Live that I was on. So if you do want to show up in the comment section, I would suggest hopping onto your computer. That way we can see you. If you have questions that you want to ask the guest or myself, we can get it in real time. Otherwise, we will definitely circle back and do it. And I want to say welcome back to anybody who's here. This is the live show that's kind of really become a legacy project for me of impossible equals impossible. And the whole point behind the show was when I had came onto LinkedIn and really started taking this whole creator thing seriously. It was during the green banner season for a lot of people, right? Where your news feed was just flooded with green banners. A lot of people who were experiencing kind of the most challenging time of their life. And what I wanted to do was really bring inspiration. And I've been so privileged and grateful to have had conversations with so many incredible people over the past 3 years, and really giving them a platform to share their story. Not saying that just because somebody's overcome something incredible means that you can, or that you should do it, but it's just the hope, right? The idea that impossible equals impossible. And it's been so fascinating for me. We've been doing this show for, gosh, almost 8 months now, and impossible equals impossible has kind of always been my story. But it's been really fascinating to see how, for many of the people who watch it and have been guests, like impossible equals impossible has been their story as well. And I really just can't wait to get into this. But before I do, I want to make this message because I think it's so important for a lot of people that who you are is more important than what you do and the things that you've accomplished, right? And so many times when I see people doing introductions of people, they talk about, oh, they're, a speaker, best-selling author, blah, 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 blah. I want to tell you tonight, my guest is my soul brother, Neal Phalora. We'll get into that in the conversation. And really, he and I instantly connected. We met at a LinkedIn audio event, and he's become an incredible friend, one of the most genius intellectual people that I've had the privilege of meeting. And if you do not have this man in your network, you want to connect, you want to have a conversation, an absolute asset to any network. And with no further ado, Neal is an inspirational speaker, serial entrepreneur, and a neuro-spiritual coach. Neal has a podcast called Your Greatest Hits Podcast, featured in books about mindset, public speaking, and building a brand. Neal has been an expert guest on multiple TV spots and has shared stages with some of the most successful people in the world, like David Meltzer, MMA fighter, Michael Chandler, and one of the greatest speakers in the world, Tim Storey. Through decades of coaching others, Neal transformed his life by creating a new relationship with his body and brain. Neal has helped his clients become fulfilled and scale financially through his WELLTHTM Method. I know we'll have to talk about that. I got a lot of messages. It wasn't a typo. We'll get into what it means later on. Neal creates a unique roadmap for sustainability to accomplish goals outside the hustle. His clients' results clearly point to a better pipeline, impactful marketing, and more sales. And one of the most impactful things that my soul brother has taught me, and this is a quote that I never forget and I share it all the time: vulnerability is the permission slip. He's had an incredible story of triumph and everything that he's experienced, and I cannot wait to have this incredible conversation with my soul brother, Neal Phalora. Welcome to the show, brother. Happy Wednesday. How are you doing?
Happy Wednesday to you, my friend. And man, I've been waiting for this all day, just because it is about the people watching, but it is just the unique ability to combine our energies, which that first initial spark we had was It changed my worldview of LinkedIn and how I saw LinkedIn and the opportunities here. And from there on, I hope I've contributed to you as much as you've contributed to me, my friend.
Oh, absolutely. It's been, so many times, like, and I'm sure you can relate, right? We have very similar mentors and circles. The idea of one conversation or one connection could change your entire life. I've had that happen like time and time again over the past 2 months. And before we get into this conversation, because we have so much to talk about, I just want to say hello to some people. Ken Dunner, so good to see you, my friend. Savor the flavor. I will be looking forward when you get back on LinkedIn. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, thank you. It is my God, what is the word? Unique aloha shirt that I always wear. Yeah. So, brother Aaron Gibson, so good to see you, my friend. You absolutely have to have a conversation with Neil. If you aren't connected, definitely connect with him. Darrow, so good to see you, my friend. And who else is here? Oh, Amber, so good to see you. And Amber, I
Yay.
know Neil considers you his soul sister, and you're definitely one of mine and really good friend. Thank you so much for being here. So, Neil, let's kind of unpack. Like we have so much to talk about tonight: wealth, vulnerability, but basically your story. We instantly kind of connected because we had really similar kind of upbringings. Tell us a bit about kind of how Neil, or should we say Neo, became who he is today.
Yeah. So, my story is hallmarked by a lot of unique things. Immigrant parents that came from dirt floor farm, making a life here in the US, growing up in an environment where, in Midwest culture was so different from Indian culture that I was always put in positions where maybe I didn't fit in, but I fit in everywhere at the same time. And while not being forced into the Indian traditions per se, but having that strong background, but also trying to find my way and how do I take the American traditions together, which was an interesting split because when we're young, we really want that sense of this is who we are and this is our identity. And being untethered like that most of my life, even to this day, has served me really well. And then by the same token, that house was really challenging mentally and physically. There was a lot of abuse on that level, but it allowed me to take the spiritual gifts that I have from a very young age of 5. I can remember being how connected I am, how empathic I was, how much I could see into other people and fire those through that, which led me to a journey of understanding that 50% of our mindset is here. The issues are in the tissues, right? And being held in the beautiful and brutal tensions of the opposites over and over again gave me an awakening that I could have never had without it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I know obviously with your professional career, right? You've spent a lot of time in the corporate space, finance, real estate, all these type of things. How it must have been so interesting for you, right, to come from a place of like abject poverty, right? Dirt floor. And then I remember you had mentioned that your family got to a point where like you had money, right? But then it was kind of like your view of it was kind of skewed because of how your parents like grew up, right? I know that was a big conversation. Talk to us about how that has really kind of impacted your life, because I remember instantly why you and I connected. We had that finance background, but once you kind of make the money, right? Once you do the things, you stay in the, 4 or 5 star hotels, you get to do all these type of things. You kind of find out that, okay, this is cool that I've experienced that, but like what next? Right? Like there needs to be kind of more, because, and I'm sure you can relate to this too. I've found for myself is that I spent so much of my life like constantly chasing things instead of being. And a lot of us think that when we kind of achieve our goals, that's kind of us living intentionally. What I've really kind of uncovered, and I guess it would be discovered, right, over the past few weeks, is that the way that you take live life intentionally and not let it pass you by is by being instead of chasing. And I'd love to know kind of your thoughts on that and what you would want to share.
Yeah, that is so good and so on point. And what I'll say from my upbringing is that, I always kind of compare my life to rich dad, poor dad. And my dad was poor dad. He couldn't really go beyond a certain means because he had that mentality. And I started to learn how money is really an energetic. It's an exchange of trust, right? It's a exchange of value that's much beyond. If 70% of people who win the lottery go bankrupt, then we know money is a mindset. So I never really had the entrepreneurial upbringings or ideas because that's the biggest 80% of entrepreneurship is mindset. And I never had that kind of modeling. So I became an entrepreneur, which means I ran a small company within an 80,000 person company before I became an entrepreneur. And I had a lot of hurdles to get over from how I was brought up, but I never realized like how difficult it is to come outside your own mindset to start generating in the entrepreneurial space. Because I was pretty successful in the corporate space, but when you come outside that and you have to represent you, that's why I say entrepreneurship or any high level position in corporate is the ultimate self-development program because you have to come up against all your things. And where do we encounter those? Everything that you're working on is coming up in the present moment. You don't need to revisit all the past. And learning how to navigate that based on my life lessons was the biggest journey that I would ever be on.
Yeah. And you have such an incredible story because I want to kind of dive into this neuro-spiritual thing because I've always been fascinated with, so for a lot of you that don't know, I actually wanted to be a neurosurgeon. That was my goal since I was 10 years old. I had started going to college for it when I was 16. And I joke that nobody in Hawaii knew what a neurosurgeon was because when I wanted to be one, they actually didn't have any on the island. So you would have had to go to a different state, basically. And I've always just been fascinated with the brain because it's just so amazing. And then obviously because of our mutual brilliant friend, Dr. Leslie, who educates us on the difference between the brain and the mind,
Yes.
we've learned a lot. But tell me more about how you got to this fascinating topic of neuroscience, and where did you kind of discover this idea of neuro-spiritual coach? Because I've never heard it before, so I'd love to know more about that.
Man, that is a loaded question, brother. It's got a long answer, but for the sake of good dialogue, I will shorten it because I know people want to hear from you as much as they probably want to hear from me. But I was somebody who was put into science sort of by proximity, going into the Asian stereotype. And my dad had 2 doctoral degrees. But when I was in science over and over, what I would get is the intellectual hit for God, source, universe. I stood up in the middle of physics class when they were presenting that particles change their behavior based on whether they're observed or not and said, "Are you kidding me?" When nobody else was really getting what I was getting. And I had those hallmarks over and over. I got to med school early and was doing, before I left as chronically ill and, high anxiety, I was on a cardiac rotation and every one of my patients talked about serious heartbreak. And I came to the resident, I said, "Isn't that interesting?" And he goes, "Eh." So I was collecting this data over and over. And because I had to deal with the issues that were in the tissues, I came to a point where I could no longer hide the many years of my chronic fatigue and anxiety that even though people saw me as super high achieving, they had no idea. And that's where I had to go, okay, the medical system, the science system is no longer helping me. I need to lean into my deeply empathic and spiritual nature. And that's where I found neuroscience. And what I found in very much brevity is that this is the gateway to our higher self, to our spiritual self, to our claircognizant nature, our innate intelligence. And when we can align that, we can go into deep healing. And we can talk about that, but I've had deep, deep healing by doing this work to the tune of recovering my life, getting 60 pounds off me, getting off of Ativan, an anti-anxiety drug, to having a scar that I've had since I was 8 years old, completely peel off my knee in a deep healing.
Yeah. That is like so fascinating, and you and I, when we first had a conversation, I remember, like, and I've been very transparent with people, like I'm still figuring out, the whole spiritual journey, and there's so many like layers to it. And you always tell me, like, we all are, you're right, like we're
You beat me to the punch. It's like, or I was going to say, Paul, I got it all figured out. Newsflash. Yeah, yeah, right. So yeah.
yeah. And it's been really fascinating for me because there's so many people who are like skeptical, but when I would hear people share like those type of stories, I would like, it has to be real, right? Like there's no way that people are gonna fake that kind of stuff. Like it's just too real to like make up. And the fascinating thing about it, right? And I've read a lot of like research, and obviously you and I know a lot of similar people that we kind of research and share with each other, that it really is fascinating when you dive into this whole topic of the brain, mind, all these type of things, and how one everything's kind of connected, right? It's like one thing leads to another, which leads to another. And what I found personally for me is that something as simple as like going outside to go walk, right, and be in nature and kind of decompress, led to drinking more water, eating better, and all these type of things. And it really is like, I would say for each person, you really have to kind of figure out what works for you, because everybody's different, right? Like we all have things that speak to our soul that maybe might not speak to somebody else, and everything's really relative. Now, I had a lot of people who reached out to me about this whole wealth thing. And it's funny because when you and I first shared it, I believe when you first kind of came out with it, it was something that you and I had a conversation with, and I instantly got it, because what always fascinated me from my finance career is how people associated wealth with money. Because the way that wealth kind of came about was it put together two words, well and health. It had nothing to do with money. And when I saw that you put wealth, I was like, yeah, because that's basically what the word was created. Talk to us more, because when I read the bio, I know I talked about wealth being kind of your method that you use.
Mhm.
Talk to us about two things. One, how you kind of came to this method, and I'm sure a lot of people are dying to know what it is. Before we get to that, though, I just want to say hello to Elena. So good to see you, my friend.
Yay.
Neil and I haven't seen you in a while. Wishing you, sending you love. I know it's been a tough time for you, my friend, but just hang in there. We're rooting for you and here to support if you need anything. And a lot of people in the audience are here for you as well. So, with that being said, Neil, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so I came to this because I've lived this. I had that corporate career, and I won't flex on it was all the things, the pay, the international travel, but I was really sick and I left it all to zero because I wanted to heal my life. I wanted to show my kids that if I'm telling them to dream, that I also am going to model that for them. And I have no longer tolerance for this old tribe, which tells us that if we want success, we have to trade it for what, Paul? For the regrets of the dying. We have to trade the regrets of the dying are traded my physical health, my mental well-being, my time, and my most precious relationships to get what I want. And I have been on the other side. I have clients on the other side of that who basically tell me they would write a check for everything they owned if they could have the quality of life with their family members and other people, and they don't know how to feel anymore. And so I just came up with this idea that I want to be wealthy. Wealth is so important. When you're sick, when you're healthy, you have a million wishes. When you're unhealthy, you have one, to be well again, right? And so wellness is wellness, mind, body, and soul. It's the energy evaluation or the evaluation. It's an asset program, a value program for your life. It's love, the process, you, and action. It's legacy, because everybody at the end of the day, they want impact. It's time, but it's not time management. It's how to spend it, how to create it. And it's a relationship with something that is holding you instead of holding on for dear life. And these, my friends, are the secrets to true wealth, right? Instead of trading it for things that you just can't buy back, because you lose those things, you can't buy them back.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you said so much, but the one thing that really hit me, and everybody in the audience, I'm curious for you. We have like, I don't even care, honestly, quite frankly, if we go over. We have a lot to talk about. So we're just getting started on this show. But you said something that was so powerful, and you said that when you're well, you have a million options, and when you're not, you have one. In many instances, doesn't that mirror kind of really what money and wealth kind of symbolizes, right? Is this idea of abundance that when
Mhm.
you have it, it's like the entire world is at your fingertips, and when you don't have it, you're just trying to survive. And what's interesting is I've kind of started looking at everything in life really as like a catch 22, because it's like before you learn how to thrive, a lot of us learn kind of how to survive. And
Mhm.
what happens is so many people try to skip the steps, and that was the reason why the show was titled Impossible Equals Impossible. So many times when you go on social media and once people made it and all these type of things, you see their life at the highest point because that's what they want you to see. But a lot of people don't share with you the price that they had to pay. And I'm going to share with you something that really kind of changed my perspective from the last conference that I went to in February. Jesse Itzler and Sarah Blakely were speaking, and they were talking about how so many people give up what they already have for what they kind of think they want. And then what happens is once you get what you think you want, you realize that the thing that you really wanted was what you kind of have always had, right? So really fascinating perspective. I love everything that you shared. You you had this fascinating experience, right, of really overcoming health challenges, a massive health issue that, doctors basically said, like, you were bedridden, you're not going to do this or that. Give us a little more insight on kind of how that kind of led up, but then the reason why this wealth whole thing happened, because correct me if I'm wrong, but that was basically what you used to essentially heal yourself, right?
100%. 100%. Before I dive into that, remind me where we're going because I may forget. But I did want to speak to survival, if you don't mind, for a moment, Paul. Um,
Absolutely. The
yeah.
show is yours, my friend. This is
Oh,
your show. I'm just here facilitating. I love to listen.
you do. You are such an amazing host, Paul. But I really want to speak to this because we are wired for survival. Evolutionarily, that's what we're here to do. Especially this meat suit, it's not made for success. Success is an unnatural state in which you have to come outside basic needs. And the level of mindset it takes to survive is a small amount of mindset. The level it takes to have success is to get yourself to that unnatural state. And I tell people, I'm like, when I got recovered, that was one level mindset, but it is way harder now. Even I had something amazing even happen today. One of my biggest wins in my I didn't even share that with you in my coaching so far was amazing. I'm so excited to work with this person. And what I'll say is, here's the thing, and I'll end on this, that I discovered: when you're in survival as an entrepreneur, a business person, it's all about the money. But when you move to a place where you focus on the people and the cause, you move from survival to revival. And that's what
Mm.
people need to do, is move into a revival. And everybody who's created anything amazing has made that shift as a visionary from survival to revival. And their ask is much bigger than that. I can talk about my health journey a little bit, but if you have anything to say, let me know.
Yeah, that was really powerful, this idea of survival and revival, because kind of similar to your story, right? I had the career, the everything, trained, traveled, got to do all these things in the first quarter of my life that I didn't think was possible. And a lot of people didn't really understand why I kind of gave up my finance career, right? Because for a lot of people, one of the things that I learned is that what people see as their ceiling could really be your floor. And that's like one of the most important things to note. But it's interesting because as I've been on this journey, I mean, you've been an incredible brother, and you and I we always have deep conversations. I feel like that's why you and I are so close. But I've never really ever been broken. You know how like you see people that they have nothing, they're like, you know, starting over, but they're just so broken, right?
Mhm.
That never was the case for me. And even when I was maybe in a position where like I needed to charge people, I didn't. And in a weird way, things kind of had their way of working out because what you shared really resonated with me. I don't really look at it from a survival point, but it's like a revival, right? I
Mhm.
remember my mentor told me when I first started training with her, she said, everybody in the world is a millionaire in your mind, or at least you should be. And if you're not, then it's really about just kind of catching up in reality. And your reframe was powerful because it's kind of like you're reviving your mind, but like physically, right? And actually like turning your um, turning your dreams essentially into reality. So I will let you chime in on your health journey because I know there's a lot of people that want to know that. But let's see. Oh, we got some people that hopped in. Damien, my soul brother, so good to see you, my friend. I
Hey.
can't believe that you and Neil haven't had a conversation yet. You guys absolutely have to have a conversation. Who's here? Reginald, so good to see you. Glad you were able to make it. We'll definitely make this worth your while. And somebody else is here. Oh, Shelly Louise, so good to see you, my
Oh,
friend from
yay.
Australia who's here. And somebody's LinkedIn user. I hope this is Damien, but I'm not sure. It probably is Damien. But Neil, tell us about the health journey and really how you use this method of wealth to really kind of heal yourself when a lot of medical professionals and doctors and specialists said like this is basically going to be your reality, right? And yeah, I'm like intrigued to know about this story.
Yeah, so it became from like a deep sense of I need to change my frequency. I need to attune to a future reality. And what I discovered is that there are three versions of the present really in the mind's eye. There's the past present, the present present, and the future present. And we kind of circle a drain when we're in the present present to go, how are we gonna actually accomplish this? We go to the past present. Because in the mind, it doesn't matter what time you're in, it only matters what it's focusing in on. And my identity became this person who's sick and chronically ill and all those things. And typical hustle culture, toxic positivity teaches us what? Just get it done, do it now. All those things that don't work. They don't work. I love a positive video as much as the next person, but what I discovered is it's not lasting because neurochemically, we tend to snap back after we have these high moments and so forth. So how was I going to change that? I learned that I must attune to a different frequency and eliminate the A and just be B. And that came from a deep understanding of if I can put myself in the present, in the future tense of being well, in the neuroplasticity, in the visions, in the meditations, in the emotional frequency, right? When we get into adulthood, we vilify this four-letter word in the adult vocabulary, feeling. But if we can take that and use that to fire, we can actually connect greater to source and what's available to us. And this year, you saw my most recent post has been, I just got this intuitive hit from God, source, this universe. I'm like, tell your story. Like, Neil, focus on your wins. And because the way the brain focuses on the negative, I started focusing on the wins and I had no idea. I mean, as God is my witness, I was like, I didn't even realize that I had done all these things this year. But that is the power of coming into alignment. And so it's always more about who you're being, whether in health or wealth or finance, than what you're actually doing on this earth. And that's the big lesson that we're here to learn.
Yeah, wow, that was really powerful, and it goes back to this idea of stop chasing and start being, right? I feel like
Mhm.
when we actually get to that point of actually being, and I'm sure you can relate to this because it's it's fascinating, the whole self-awareness thing of when you're actually aware, like you start to just see things that like people can't see, and it changes the entire perspective. I've had so many conversations with with people and just like reaching out and stuff, and they're like, oh, where did you see that? Like, I didn't see it. And it reminded me, like, so many people are existing instead of really living. And I'm excited to kind of segment that, because our other soul brother, Michael Paterano, Michael, Neo, and I are going to be doing uh, my next audio event series with the two of them. We're going to be talking about self-awareness on Mondays from 7 to 9. And I'm so excited for that conversation. This self-awareness topic has really been something that's kind of always popping up in my life, right? In terms of giving people grace and how I'm able to do that, because I have the self-awareness to see kind of myself in that person, right? And really notice that what one of the most powerful things that you have said to me when I was kind of on the spiritual journey. I know we're always on it, but you know what I mean. Like when I was actually, or I should say, when I was in it. I'm still in it. Anyway, um, was this idea that you are the frequency that you feel frequently,
Mm-hmm.
and when you said that, I was like, I was kind of confused, and then obviously being around Dr. Leslie and Michael and all these type of things, I start to kind of understand why gratitude for me has really become a state of being and a lifestyle versus kind of just a word, because I realize that that's how I'm able to maintain my vibration, is like, even when things go wrong, I lean into gratitude, I lean into service and joy and um, love for people and giving them grace, where a lot of people would be frustrated. And kind of talk to us more about this idea of you are the frequency that you feel frequently. One, I really just want to know, like, where did you hear it? Was it something that you came up with kind of on your own, or like a discovery? And then for somebody who like is like me, who's very basic on the whole spirituality energy type of conversation, really kind of explain it to people and how they can not only understand it but harness it to really transform their life.
Yeah, great question. And you're not basic, Paul. Never say that about yourself. um, but I appreciate where you're coming from. So there are a lot of things that have just downloaded to me. I've written things, had things channeled through me that I found 10 or 15 years later, spoken by people that we know, right? And so that's available to everybody. That is not like a thing that is just a Neal Phalora has access to. We all have access to it. And ultimately, if I were to get really serious about it, that's what I'm doing for people, is giving them greater access to what's available already to them. Because everything that you need is vibrating 1 inch from your skin. We think that we're trying to get something that hasn't happened to us or is not in our sphere of influence. And all we're trying to do is receive what's already been given to us. So that may be a little bit woo-woo for all the people that are watching, but I'm okay with that because I'm way woo-woo. I might have started out in science, but I am woo-woo, and we won't insert the expletive there. But I do think for people who are trying to access this, who really want to understand this, I can give you a very, very simple example of the frequency that you feel frequently. Everybody who's watching this presently or in the replay can think about a time when somebody said something to you, a few words, maybe it was a little bit more, that fundamentally changed how you thought about everything. Now let's think about that for a moment. Did they go in and retool all your beliefs? Did they take all your past experiences, all your limiting beliefs, all your traumas, and then somehow magically through a spiritual vacuum pull them out of your mind? They did not. But something they said created a shift, and that's the frequency. Words are frequency, and frequency is medicine. And we can show that everything on this planet is fundamentally vibrating at a frequency. And so having these minor shifts, what do? They increase your ability to create awareness. And there are other techniques I'll let you ask the questions that we can go into that can create that awareness. But that's just a very simple example. The other one I'd like to give is the way that children respond to music. My kids, as soon as they could move, when I put music on, they change their state and their frequency by whistling to them, by singing to them. I calm them. And we as human beings respond to that. that is a frequency that you're feeling, and it changes you physiologically. It changes what you can receive. It changes you spiritually.
Yeah, wow, that was incredible. I just want to give a shout out. Our soul brother made it. I know he's got the kiddos and he's got a lot going on. Michael, so I didn't get a chance to text you, but Neal and I had decided that we're gonna do our audio event on Mondays from 7 to 9. So you heard it here first, and yeah, you talked about like so many things there, Neal, and like this idea of music, right? Because when I joined 10x, I remember like a lot of people thought that it was about like money, right? Like, oh, you're going to multiply like your money 10x. But really, what it was about was multiplying your entire life 10 times over. And I remember one of the things was like the spiritual part. And I remember having like getting to have a conversation with Grant Cardone. And I was like, but I don't really feel like I'm spiritual. And then he asked me, he's like, well, tell me, what do you like to do? And I was like, I love helping people. And, yeah, I love helping people. And he's like, that is like one of the most like spiritual things. And then you talked about this idea of music. And for me, I've always connected to kind of lyrics per se of music than like the actual kind of beat. And what you shared kind of just put everything together for me about the words that you use, along with like the music and the messages, can in many ways create your frequency. And I guess that's why I'm really drawn to the lyrics, because I feel it really aligns with me. And I guess that's where, for each person, right, it's relative for what works for you. Some people like beat. I know you like to dance and you can sing. I will not be singing or dancing, but that's just so fascinating. You and I talk so much about personal development. We have a lot of the same mentors. You went to an incredible conference that you actually got to MC. I definitely want to talk about that and kind of what was really the biggest takeaway. But I always love having this conversation with my friends who are really close brothers and sisters who are really into this whole personal development space like I am. Who's really been the most impactful kind of mentor in your life, and what was the most valuable thing that they've taught you?
Wow, there have been so many. But if I had to really, I had a coach. Not a lot of people know about her, but she is an amazing coach. Her name is Sloan, and she just helped me realize how what I do applies to everyone and how I should look at it at my gifts. She also helped me realize in a moment, which was a big download. She got me there, but I had the download myself, is that like, Paul, the storm may happen to us, but eventually we become the storm, right? And while I didn't do the things and haven't acted in the way in which I was treated, I was treating myself that way. I would say my other mentor that is David Meltzer, and he's had such a profound impact on me because he gave me the permission. Like, he's this guy whose life was basically the Jerry Maguire story. He ran that sports agency in real life, lost everything, including his mother's home, who he forgot to take out of the business, right? And to go to his mother after growing up in a house where there wasn't enough to eat and tell her that he'd lost everything, and rebuilt it from a place of asking for help, but being this deeply spiritual dude. And I'm not talking about like just mentioning spirit. I'm talking about quantum mechanics and studying Buddhism and Kabbalahism and all these things, right? And just knowing that was he was a profound mentor for me as well. I mean, those people have had, but there have been a lot of people, and I think that's the other thing about learning to lean in your spiritual gifts, is that if you learn to lean into them, which is what the natural thing did for me, you can receive so much more. We're constantly in a state of fear and scarcity by what we download as the human operating system adults. But man, once you attune to that, it is amazing what is available to you everywhere. And I go in and out of it. I go in and out of it. Sometimes I'm in a state of depravity, and then sometimes I'm like, man, I cannot, right now in my life, I cannot keep up with the stream of stuff that's coming into me. I just physically cannot keep up.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and and hearing you kind of share that really resonated for me. Why I love my mentor mom, Danelle Delgado, so much, because so many people like look at things when, especially when you're kind of in that lifestyle, right? I feel like a lot of them are really you get attached to the lifestyle part, and I mean, sure, she helped me make money and do all these type of things, speak, and she really kind of inspired me to come on LinkedIn. And I would never have joined 10X if it wasn't for her. But honestly, like the most impactful thing that she did for me was like fix my relationship with my mom,
Mhm.
right? And going back to this conversation, I I've really been kind of figuring out, because I'm respectful to everyone, right? But there's not a lot of people that are really kind of like my people, that like click. And I was really thinking about why like you and Michael really have become kind of like my soul brothers, along with Damien. And I look at how we've all, maybe minus Damien, because Damien didn't experience the a lot of the things that you, Michael, and I did, but without really having like a dad that was really present for our life, I've just been blown away by the fathers that you and Michael are, and as intellectual and uh, emotionally intelligent and aware and spiritually gifted as you both are. You both are incredible, even better people. And I see the way that you both treat your kids, and the way that you have really given them a lot of these tools for awareness right at that young age, where so many people are just kind of in the weeds, just living and doing crazy things.
Yeah.
This kind of leads into our next topic of vulnerability. But I remember watching like videos and you telling me how like I cry in front of my kids, and I know Michael does the same, and how you don't hide who you are from your kids to conform to society standards, right? Of, oh, men must be macho and strong and all these type of things. So I wanted to tell you that. But this idea of vulnerability was really, I would say, the catalyst, right, for where you and I connected, because I've found for me that vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. And you said something that blows my mind about how vulnerability is the permission slip, right? And I know a lot of people in the room are audio event hosts. You see it all the time in the audio events. One person shares their story, and then it creates this domino effect where more people keep going up. I want to know about how you kind of got to that point of vulnerability. And then the quote that you mentioned, like vulnerability is the permission slip, was that something that you got from David Meltzer, or was that something that you kind of discovered on your own journey?
Yeah, there are a lot of Nealisms, for better or worse. But yeah, that was something that I discovered my own journey, and it's been my unique superpower for my entire life, right? And I think I was so grounded into that, I didn't realize that maybe people weren't on that frequency, and I felt a little more isolated at first, through some parts of my life. But then I just discovered how impactful it was. And I helped manage a call center one time. We were a unique call center. We trained, and we traveled, and we did all kinds of cool things. We did soft selling. We trained sales reps, and people would always send me the angry people. There's like, somebody's really angry, but I just learned how to be super vulnerable with them. When I served tables, same thing, right? I made crazy money serving tables. People followed me from restaurant to restaurant, but it was the vulnerability. And then I'd have people ask me over and over, like, I don't know how to have this conversation. But I think the piece that's missed, not I think, I know the piece that's missing, especially as we get emotionally constipated as adults. We forget how to catch and release our emotions like we're fishing, is that vulnerability really means authentically owning the emotion and relaying it to someone, but keeping possession of it. What people do when they think they're being vulnerable is what they do is they use their emotions as a weapon, right? They throw it at people. You can be angry and super vulnerable so long as you own the anger. You could be stressed out and super vulnerable. It doesn't always have to be blubbering and crying or a deep
Yeah.
sense of love that you're projecting, but give somebody something effing real when
Yeah.
you're communicating with them so that they get where you're coming from. It might be, look, I'm scared for my life to have this conversation with you. It scares me deeply, but here's what I have to say, right? But then when you have dominion over your universe, which is in large part your emotions, then your vulnerability can exponentiate. And people, even in a selling conversation, people are four times more likely to buy from you if there is an emotional connection.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said. And my definition of vulnerability has changed because one of the things, and I shared this publicly, but I didn't realize how, for me, because my network on LinkedIn has grown significantly over the past 2 to 3 months, like it's probably like doubled. And I didn't realize how I was kind of really playing it safe in the audio events, right? Like a lot of the things that I would share were kind of things that I would already heal from. So I would get messages from people like, oh, thank you for your vulnerability, this and that. And when I would really kind of sit with myself, I was like, but you're really kind of hiding, right? Because the way that I look at vulnerability for myself, and like I said, everything's relative, everybody's going to be different. But one of the things that I always share with my clients that I work with is the first thing that I do is I meet them and I tell them, like, just straight up, it's like, tell me your story. Like, I want to know. And when I hear that story, like every time, I'm just blown away. And I'm like, how in the heck does the world not know who you are? Right? Like, this is an incredible story. And they tell me that I don't want to share it. And the quote that I always use is, the story that you don't want to share is the story that will change your life. Because what I learned on this latest chapter is that everybody's experiencing the same things, right? It's just that some people have the courage to share it, and some don't. And for those that don't share your story, this isn't shaming you. It's just saying that vulnerability, to Neal's point, is the permission slip. When you see somebody else do it, you're it gives you some type of like faith and trust, like, okay, this is a safe place, people are doing that, you see the love in the audio events and all these type of things. But yeah, and I realized that for me, vulnerability is really sharing the things that you don't want to share, right? And Michael and I were talking about that earlier, and how people think that they know us because they see us on social media, they see us do LinkedIn audio events. I joke with people all the time, if you think that I like to speak, then you really don't know who I am, because I like to listen. I like to do a lot of things behind the scenes. For me, I look at confidence as like a silent thing, and being able to serve and all these type of things. Like, I don't need to be in the spotlight, but I do it because impact requires attention. Yeah, what a powerful share. I just realized, because I knew I was so excited to have this conversation, we totally skipped over your amazing event. The it was called Impact Effect, right? Your
Correct.
event.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about, you got to MC. I actually knew a lot of the speakers because I've heard them speak live, but I saw on like one of your stories, like actually getting to have conversations and meals with people like Tim Storey. And if you don't know who Tim Storey is, he's one of the greatest speakers in the world. He's Oprah's life coach. Just an absolutely incredible story of rags to riches, basically. Talk to me about how that experience kind of was for you. And I want to know, what was kind of like that one takeaway from that event that like really changed everything for you? Because I remember as soon as that was done, you called me, we talked on the phone for like almost an hour, and you were telling me, like, brother, like, I'm so fired up, like I have things coming that I can't wait to share. And then I just start seeing just incredible things coming from you on LinkedIn. And then leading into that, I'm trying to get all of our points because we have so much to talk about. Talk to us about, was that the event that really kind of catalyzed this whole Neo thing?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, remind me on the Neo thing, because that's a little bit of a story. But what I'll say is Nashville, let me just back up a second. This entire year, I have just leaned into the frequency of fulfillment. And that's a big thing for me, like be fulfilled, scale financially, right? And so I have done less planning and strategy in this year than I have ever done in any other year of my business. Less. I mean, I have let myself basically, let me just say it this way. I have allowed things to find me than chasing them, and I know that's a big topic for you as well. You say that often. So my friend, who I just have to shout out because I have so much love for him, Jim Morris. And if you haven't met him, connect with him on LinkedIn. That dude is the real deal. I mean, he is amazing. And he asked me, a mutual friend passed the baton and said, "Hey, do you want to co-host?" And he's a spiritual brother of mine in Tennessee, one of the deepest spiritualist dudes I know. And I had no idea that it was going to be in the Wild Horse Saloon, where it seats 1,000 people, and there are going to be 2 big stadium sized monitors and all these things that they had planned. I mean, I had no clue. I was just like, yeah, sounds cool. I'll do it. And then like towards the end of all of it, he goes, "Oh, by the way, this is our venue and this is what it's going to look like." And I was shocked. I showed my wife. I'm just like, dude, am I really speaking here? Like there've been like hit country acts, and like, this is a big stage. The event itself was just tremendous, but it was a culmination of everything that I knew that I could bring. And Amanda Banks, my co-host, who I have to also shout as well, we were the pulse of everything. And this was no regular conference, because our job was not just to announce the speakers and bring them in. It was to keep the pace. But it was also, what we did was really unique, is our job was to take notes and bring our points of view and our takeaways, because the whole goal of Impact Effect was not to have another raw conference. It was like, what are your action items? And we're going to do it in community over the next 4 events and keep this going. So it was a very, very active process. And I got to a frequency, Paul, that, I mean, I just had people coming up to me. I stood in front of 4 different people and just channeled absolutely what they needed, brought people to like serious embrace or tears or both, right? And it was the take-home lesson. There were so many, we could fill a whole nother podcast for that. It was what I said before. I get all these premonitions for people that are absolutely meant for me, right? Was what I need, is that you're the frequency that you feel frequently. And I got unclogged at a level. I'm like, this, God said to me, universe said to me, this is what's available to you if you're willing to play. And I had 3 days of like virtually no sleep, but complete euphoria on freaking what I could bring to myself and other people as value. And that was just, I mean, I can't thank Jim enough, because it just literally flipped a switch at me. And while it's not there every day, I ground down into that, knowing that I have that example to lean back on. As far as the Neo thing is concerned, my last big healing was at the end of last year, beginning of the year, and I went to a conference in Nashville. That's where I spoke, and I thought about changing my name, because I had such a deeper spiritual awakening. I've done many of those, and to put a fine tooth on the whole thing, I went to VCon, and there I got to meet like one-on-one time with like names like Gary Vee and Tom Bellew, and went to a VIP dinner, and it was so amazing. But every time I said my name, people said Neo. And I said, "No, my name is Neal." And they go, "Neo." And this is not something that happened once, Paul. It happened probably 10, 15 times that night. And then it continued to happen after that. And after Nashville, I just said, you know what? I'm going to allow myself to have this rebirth, which is literally what Neo means. And I decided I'm going to be Neo. And I got a henna tattoo with my kids, because we were going to celebrate Diwali. It's fading.
I did see that. Yeah, that's so incredible, and see, what's so interesting is, so I'll be like transparent with everybody, because I've had people like ask me, and you've probably seen it if you've seen like some of the Zooms that I shared. My last name, like legally, is actually Deitch Cummings. Cummings is my dad's last name. My dad passed away when I was 17, and when I came, so I think one of the reasons when I came on LinkedIn, the reason why I changed to Paul Deitch was I had figured out, and I guess I'll give some tips on LinkedIn while we're here anyway, right? I had figured out a way to be unique and unpredictable was if you put your first and last name in the first name box on when you're on your basic info, with the last name box you could put kind of like a unique phrase, which is like how I have like the light bulb and my network is my algorithm, but you could really put whatever you wanted. And I had realized kind of the same thing, right? Like I just never really kind of just identified with my dad's last name. It wasn't like I was ashamed of it or anything, but I looked at it. So it's just fascinating how that story comes up.
And by the
Um,
way, for those who are watching the replay, if you look at Paul's latest post, it is like a mini course on how to be successful on LinkedIn. It is nothing compared to his actual course, which he has deep, deep knowledge. But if you look at that and you just follow those steps, like if you took the next month and you just ground down into those steps that you outlined, you would have better traction on LinkedIn. I just wanted to give you some props, brother, because I looked at that. I'm like, man, I need to start doing a couple of these things better.
yeah, it goes back to the whole fulfillment thing, right? Because one of the things that I found, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but for me, being the only person in my professional communities in my 20s was like I felt like I was an outlier, which is funny because that's the name of my community that I joined. And I just never really felt like I belonged. And I remember having a conversation with one of my mentors and I asked like why me? Right? And she said because I asked you what was the thing that you were most proud of in your professional career, and you said that you've always maintained your integrity. And she said a lot of people can't say that, especially when you're younger, because you don't really know, like, you don't know that you're manipulating people or like they're telling you to say something just to sell, right? And I've never done that, especially in a career where people are kind of known for doing that. And one of the things for me why integrity is so important is I look at it as always doing the right thing versus kind of when it's just convenient, which is how a lot of people use the word. And I would just come across like so many of these people, cancer survivors, people who had these incredible stories, but like the money just wasn't there. Right. And I don't want to get into the whole like money limiting belief philosophy, but I really had a conversation with myself and I was just like, what is more important here? Is the money more important? Because I know my philosophy for money and I can go find it. But or do you want to live the messages and the brand and a lot of these things that you say? And that really kind of changed everything. And I know that was another reason why you and I connected, is because I see you living everything that you talk about. And where I'm really curious, this is kind of like a personal question, and then if anybody in the audience, I know we dropped a lot of things, I want to give a shout out to Melissa Cohen, so good to see you. India, Damien, so good to see you, my friend. And Damien says that I'm glad I was able to attend this event, so much information. And let's see, oh, thank you, Damien. Yeah, I do love to listen, you're right, exactly. If any of you have a question for Neal or myself, definitely drop it. Or Neal. It's gonna be weird. I'm so used to seeing it. I was just like, you need to change your name on LinkedIn to just Neo, so I don't. So I don't.
either is fine, brother. Either is fine. So
Yeah, but what I'm really curious about, right? Because this is the biggest challenge that I see from my generation that a lot of people aren't talking about. And it's this idea that so many people in my generation have essentially kind of grown up most of their life with technology, right? Especially being introduced to it at a young age where their brain isn't really developed yet to really kind of understand the manipulation and kind of programming that's going on. But I see how you've been with your kids. And I'm curious for you, right? Because one of the things that I see, and I'm curious if you have the same perspective, a lot of people in my generation are very like entitled, right? They feel like they deserve things. They're so used to having the entire world at their fingertips. And you and I know that delayed gratification is really kind of the secret to this whole success thing, right? It takes time. You have to be willing to do something without being able to see the result immediately. I'm curious for you, how have you kind of navigated that with parenting your children? Because I've seen your kids in your lives, in your videos. They're so well disciplined, so respectful, so well behaved, but you also like do let them, you do let them splurge a bit, right, on things and do
Oh
activities
yeah.
and all these type of things. I'm curious, how have you kind of found that fine line of like, I don't like the word balance, but we'll just say like kind of harmony.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I'd like to say is that like one of the things I emphasize to my kids, and for anybody listening, whether you have kids or not, is that, you said you see me living my values throughout my life, and I really take that seriously. Like anytime I've had challenges in my business or in my life, what I realize is that something is out of integrity. I'm being a more reactive dad, or I'm staying up late, or maybe I'm eating too much, or I'm too busy on my phone, or I'm not doing my exercise, or I'm not managing my negative thoughts. That's always been the key. That's always been the key. So when it comes to my kids, my philosophy of my kids is pretty simple. What I want them to do more than anything else is preserve their innocence, their imagination, their ability to do make believe, because that's where we should make the leap from make believe to belief maker, and most of us don't get there, right? And to allow themselves to be stimulated by those things that we should be stimulated by: play and imagination and sunlight and running out in the rain. I want them to be big risk takers in terms of capturing experience, but not being distracted by the things. Where we live in a distracted society, we live in a distraction economy. If social media makes you the product, and your attention is a product, right? So it's not all negative. We need some of it. They're going to have devices. They're going to, unless they live in a cave, they're going to have computers and all those things. But I want them to have the developmental legacy of knowing what it's like to be with themselves. And the balance comes in for me is that showing them that I'm a real human being and how I'm struggling with it, and allowing them to struggle. So some of the entitlement that I think, and every older generation says the younger generations go to hell. I don't believe that. That's just old people talking that aren't real wise. And we can talk about where wisdom really comes from. But the thing is that I want them to be able to struggle. And when they're upset, I'm not mean to them, but I'm just like, keep struggling, keep struggling. If they feel something, I'm like, stay with it long enough so it can become something else, right? So they understand that we are here to be held in the brutal and beautiful tension of the opposites. And for my kids, I'm like, it's safe to do that here. I'm going to hold you. I'm not going to let you fall so hard that you hurt yourself, but I want you to learn to be in these uncomfortable things, while I want to preserve you as being a kid and have the flexibility to express your emotions and ground down into those things that make us uniquely human, that are fired and wired when we were children.
Yeah, wow, that was really powerful. I want to read what Michael said here because I think this is important. I don't know if it's going to pop up, so I'm just going to read it on. Well, let's see.
There we go.
For me, it's allow mind to learn their own limits, but I also guide them towards being grounded. I do not entitle them. As well, push creativity while learning technology is a tool and amplifier. Yeah, right. I feel the same way. How you mentioned technology, Michael, I feel the same thing about money, and it's quite interesting to me. One of the kind of huge narratives that's being pushed is like housing is like so outrageous and all these type of things, and oh, these kids of this generation are never going to be able to afford a house. It's like this tool that I'm holding in my hand right now is like $1 billion tool, right? Like if I look at the monetary value of my network, it's in there. It's just about how we're using it. And yeah, I love everything that you said, brother. This has been an incredible conversation. I mean, we talked about so many things, so it seems like quickly, like it's crazy how quickly time flies. But before we go, I want to give you the floor. Anything that you want to share, anything that you want to promote, everybody on LinkedIn, definitely go connect and follow Neal. And I did drop all of his links to his website, his LinkedIn profile. It's all in the description of the event. But I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. when I really looked at what I wanted kind of my life to be, I look at the two projects that I'm working on this year as kind of like legacy projects for me. Like, I don't care if it makes any money, I don't care what it does, but a lot of the people that I've been able to bring on this show has really transformed lives for other people. And the fascinating thing for me is that you and I can look back on this video, 10, 15 years from now and look at like where we were and just be like, man, like it's crazy what has happened. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for me. I can't believe that more people on LinkedIn don't know who you are. And yeah, just so grateful to have you. And thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to give you the full screen and you get to offer your final thoughts.
Awesome. Well, for anybody who's watching right now and the replay, what I would like to say is that there's just so much more that's available to you, and it breaks my heart. It's been my life mission. I know what the pursuit of something great means to human beings. I mean, it's our absolute hunger to have progress, and we want, for if we're stagnate like anything else, it tends to putrefy, it tends to rot, and so. But what I don't want people to do is to give up the things that are precious to them, their mental well-being, their spiritual well-being, their time, their relationships. I've seen it over and over again. So I just want to break that cycle and teach people that there's a sustainable way to accomplish their goals. And so, full flex intended, I'm looking for people who are extremely heart-centric, who are spiritual, but have massive vision and want to scale something because they understand that fulfillment, legacy is really important. And if you're that person, I'm not looking for everybody, but I'm looking for those few people in that category, then I'd love to take this walk with you. There's no hard sell when it comes to me. It has to be very aligned for you and me because I'm all in with everybody. When I'm coached with somebody, I'm all in. I'd like to just wrap up to say is that if you do nothing else through the end of this year, find some belief system where life is holding you instead of holding on for dear life, because that was my switch at the end of last year, where I really felt life was holding me and I understood how things are, everything, even the hard stuff, is conspiring in my favor to galvanize me to the next level of power and contribution. And that's not available just to a Neal Phalora or a Paul. It's available to all of us. So much love. And thank you, Paul. You are an amazing dude. Since I've joined LinkedIn and I've been under Paul's sphere and tutelage, I think I went from maybe 1,200, 1,300 followers to about almost 2,000 now. But I don't measure my success in that. But it's one way in which I have attained not just any relationships, but quality relationships. So I appreciate you, brother. Have lots of love for you. And thank you. I'm not hearing you right now, brother. Yeah, I'm not hearing you.
Oh, I was muted. Oh, this is so interesting. I never mute myself on this live video, but it was because I had gone off and I guess I was muted. Anyway, I just wanted to say,
Still not hearing you, Paul.
You're still not hearing me?
Nope.
Weird. Can anybody else hear me? I'm not muted now. It looks like my thing is going.
Maybe it's over the live, but I can't actually hear you. I'm hoping it's still coming through. So
weird.
The pearls of technology.
That is odd. Okay, can you hear me now?
We're not here to make it perfect, just to make it meaningful and impactful.
Yeah, well,
so that's okay.
I guess we're going to end it. Thank you so much, brother, for being here, and everyone else. This has been an amazing live show, as always, and we will see you next week for another amazing guest and an amazing conversation. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Have a great night.